Right, so Smash Palace is out, and I gotta say, it is quite a phenomenal product, not just for UPF as well, right? It comes with so many goodies, and I would recommend this as the beginner product for Flesh and Blood, because you get, some crack shuffle plays out of it, even if you don't want to play UPF, right? It comes with an unbelievably solid piece of literature in terms of a beginner game journal, something that we strongly want in a lot of other products, right? We wanted something like this in the Armory decks. We've gone close to it with the sheet for Gravy, but the actual booklet for Smash Palace is phenomenal. Not to mention the actual, again, board game quality tokens and playmats, right? You get two-player playmats essentially that are proper thick board game quality, along with all the pop-out tokens as well. So even if you don't necessarily have an interest in Mastery Pack Guardian, this is still a phenomenal starting product because of all the extra goodies that come along with it, right? But that said, I'm the type of person that does believe everything can be improved upon, right? This is designed to be a board game, but generally speaking, how do we get our extra little bit of use out of this box? Well, for me, the first thing that I thought of when I saw this box is it is really good quality and it would make an excellent storage box, but the layout leaves something to be a little bit desired. So we have the token tray up the top, which is quite large for the actual amount of tokens that come with it, but you can throw your dice in there as well. And then we have sort of 3 awkward deck slots that aren't really designed for a proper hard shell deck case, right? They were designed for the booster packs and the event deck. So what you can actually do is fairly easily adjust the box to fit a lot more. So all you have to do, empty the box. Nice, easy step 1. Step 2, you can remove the middle divider, right? It's just propped in there with a little bit of extended cardboard into those little slots that you can see. So it is nice and easy to remove. From there, we can actually untuck the back edge of the box. And by untucking this, what we can then do is invert the folds and push it back down to give us a lot more space in the actual tray of the box. From there, we can also cut along that last opening of the little divider between the token tray and the rest of the box. So if we cut up, forward, then to the right, back down, and then back to the left to sort of create a little flap and a little bit that we can prop down. What we can then do is create a nice, more compact, smaller area for our tokens and counters, as well as a nice, beautiful slot to stick our event deck in. And just like that, with a little bit of crafty tweaking, we can fit a lot more into the box. And speaking of getting crafty with it, check out this awesome new tee provided to me by Into the AM. Now, support for these videos is as simple as just giving the video a watch, maybe hitting that like and subscribe, right? It's only a few buttons on screen. But if you ever do feel like going that little step further and supporting me and getting something out of it for yourself, you can check out Into the AM and their apparel range. You can use my code CLUEDIN at checkout for 10% off, or you can find their links in the description or the pinned comments. For reference, this is their beautiful new Eternal Blossom design featuring a stunning back piece of artwork, right? That has all been hand designed from scratch, so that's beautiful to see, right? It's snugly fitting, and again, surprisingly, getting stuff shipped to Australia from Into the AM is very affordable, right? They are a really solid line of clothing. So yeah, if you do feel like throwing a little bit more support my way and getting something out of it for yourself, feel free to go clothes shopping. Right, with that out of the way, we've taken care of the box, but what about the replayability of Smash Palace? So, if you've cracked all the packs, you've probably ended up with a stack of cards like this, right? You've put the heroes away, you've packed up the event deck, and you just have a whole mess of cards that were used in the crack shuffle play experience, right? The varied experience. So how do we recapture that? Now, this wasn't necessarily my first thought. In fact, what I'm going to do with Smash Palace, we'll get to in a second, but it's probably a little bit more elaborate than just reusing what came in the box. So this was very helpfully pointed out to me as a perfect way to reutilize all the pieces that come with your Smash Palace kit. So the first and easiest step is to, well, sort the cards. So the easiest way to sort it is by equipment, rares, blues, and our reds and yellows. So we'll end up with 12 bits of equipment, 12 rares to pick from, a nice stack of 48 blues, and 60 red/yellow cards. Meaning now there's a few different ways to then reutilize this pack of cards for our Smash Palace board game. Now this supports 4 players as per our 12 packs, meaning that all we have to do is deal out, draft, however you want to organize it, everyone 3 different equipment pieces, 3 different rares, and then an equal amount of our blues, right? So it'll be 12 apiece, and our reds and yellow at 15 each, right? Meaning we get a total of 30 cards and 3 equipment pieces, along with, of course, the selection of heroes, right? So in total, that's the easiest way for us to reuse everything that comes with Smash Palace, right? And support, again, continued games of 4 players. But ultimately, what I love about these nice, big, thick playmats, right, is the fact that you have one side that is just this solid, basically purple fill of the Smash Palace symbol, but because of that, it makes it the perfect surface to then support more than 4 players, right? If we just open it up, stick the two side by side, we can fit a whole bunch more people around the table and maximize the fact that we have a whole bunch of heroes to select from and have a big bash for Smash Palace. So when it comes to my actual box, the way I am going to set it up is always going to be in support of all 7 heroes. So what I currently have in my Smash Palace kit is this, right? So again, I nice and easily adjusted it. So we have that smaller token tray, a Smash Palace box, and then we have a whole bunch of cube shells, right? So I have a set that are for a more draft experience, more randomized experience, and then also set decks for each hero. And again, through customizing the box in this manner, everything just fits nice and neatly back into it. I can still fit both playmats right on top and have it nice and sealed, ready to go for my Smash Palace experience. But again, to reiterate, right, the easiest way for us to take advantage of everything that comes with Smash Palace is again to fundamentally use the 12 packs that come with it, even though it is going to be a varied experience between everyone. And it also does mean that you will have to leave the Majestics in the box or swap them out if you have the luxury of a few extra packs. You can then, of course, go that step further, like what I've done, to try and create a more fulfilling experience, as well as just a bigger, better board game feel. So again, just to reiterate, right, to reuse the 12 packs, nice and simple, sort into your piles. You've got your equipment, 12 cards, rares and majestics, 12 cards, blues, 48, and red and yellow, 60 cards. You can then shuffle and deal the cards out to each player, right, giving each person 3 equipment, 3 rares / majestics, 12 blues, and 15 reds or yellows. Or if you do want a bit more of a fulfilling experience, right, a bit less of a randomized experience, you could always take turns drafting from those piles of cards, right, to create a bit more of a personalized experience and selection of X cards for X hero that you might want to play for Smash Palace. Now, when it comes to, again, the extra things that I've thrown into my box, the first way that, again, I've wanted to expand upon the experience is to support all manner of players, right, from 2 all the way to 7, because that is how many different unique heroes we have access to. While again, we don't mind mirror matches. They're not the greatest thing, so I do think in the sense of a board game, it is great, right, that we have 7 different available options, and it could be a 7-player brawl, right? That sounds fantastic. So the first concept is Smash 42, which is basically 6 piles of 42 cards, therefore supporting up to 7 players, right? So basically, it's 42 equipment, 42 rares, 42 blues twice, right? So that gives us 84 in total, 42 yellows and 42 reds. And these are essentially the packs of cards that comprise those cube shells you saw. And this means from these 42 packs of cards, they can be dealt, pile drafted, or even deal and drafted, right? So in order to deal them out, right? Nice and easy. Every person gets 6 cards from every pile, meaning for the equipment, they get a selection of equipment. Maybe there's some double up, maybe there's not, right? But they do have the selection of choice. For everything else, they will end up with a nice 30-card deck in the spirit of UPF. But it also means that it's tuned a little bit better to my liking. Again, a flexible amount of equipment, as well as 6 rares instead of the usual 3. 12 blues on par, and then 6 yellows and 6 reds to form, again, that 30-card deck. Now, to give a proper example of what's going on in my Smash Palace kit, we have our pile of 42 rares. So again, we're using 42 cards, so it supports up to 7 players, or each of the individual heroes for Smash Palace, right? With our 42 cards, if we're going with the deal method, for instance, all we have to do is deal each player 6 cards. So for instance, say we have ourselves 4 players. Well, we just keep dealing until each of them have 6 cards. This means there will be some remaining cards in each pile, but that's fine. It means that each experience should be just a little bit more randomized, because there will always be that selection of cards that we don't use. So these will be the 6 rares that help comprise our 30-card deck. We do that for equipment, for our 2 sets of blues, and our reds and yellows. And that way, each person has a selection of equipment they can pick from, along with the rares, blues, and reds and yellows to make up their deck. But then expanding upon that, right, we have pile drafting, which is essentially we're going to cut each pile to suit the player count. So 42 supports 7. If we drop it down to 36, that supports 6 players, and so on, right? So we do that, we cut the deck down to size, and then we're able to draft from those piles, right? And again, because they are big piles of cards, the simplest way to me to do this, while also putting a fun spin on it, is to draw 3 cards from the top of a pile. You select 1 to keep, you put 1 back on top and 1 to the bottom, and then you pass that pile to the next person. This means that we can draft it in a normal play experience, right, where each person starts with a pile, or we can do it 1 pile at a time depending on the experience. And then for the next method of pile drafting, again, we're starting with one of our 6 individual piles, but this time we're going to cut the pile to match the amount of players we have. So for each player that is missing, because again, this is built for 7 players, we're going to get rid of 6 cards. So if we were to only play with 4 players, means we would end up cutting 18 cards. So 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, right? Leaving the correct number of cards so that each player ends up with 6 from the pile. Now, for pile drafting, we're going to draw 3 cards, look at them, pick one to keep, put one to the bottom, and leave one on top for the next player. So there's a little bit of strategy there, plus again, the ability to help shape the deck for whatever hero you end up with, right? So it should create a bit fun and unique of an experience. Then lastly, we have deal and draft, which is probably a bit closer to an experience most people like. So nice and simple, you can select the heroes however you want, but the way I'm suggesting is you give one player all 7 and you take turns drafting the hero, and then you deal cards from each pile so that every player has 6 cards and draft, right? So from those 6 cards each player is dealt from each pile, they're able to draft and select the pieces that match their hero a bit more specifically to create a little bit more of a fun experience. Then lastly, for deal and draft, right, all we have to do, again, for each of the piles is deal out 6 cards to each player. Once they have their 6 cards, then we proceed to draft like usual, right? So you get to look at the cards, pick one, and then pass to the left and then the right as we go through all of the 6 piles. So essentially, there'll be 6 rounds of drafting, again, to help create a nice well-rounded deck. I would suggest that you start with heroes. Each player gets a hero, then maybe equipment, then you go through your blues, since they're a bit more baseline, right? They just fundamentally make up your pitchable cards, right? And then you could throw in the reds, yellows, and rares lastly, as these will be the most complementary cards. Now, understandably, this isn't the easiest of arts, right? Each Mastery Pack Guardian pack only comes with 1 rare, which can be a little bit of a downer with what we're trying to do, because usually commons and rares are both plentiful. But in terms of the card selection that I am putting into, again, those cube shells, I'm using 2 of every rare, 2 of every equipment, 4 of every blue, 2 of every yellow, 2 of every red, with some little exceptions for balancing and tweaking, right? But generally speaking, this means that you do need at least 2 copies of every single card. Now, you could get away with cutting out the rares and just, going to your local and hopefully being able to get a whole bunch of commons from them, right? And then, again, creating a similar experience for your Smash Palace box. But in terms of, again, the personalized card selection that I am using, with the 2 of every rares, I'm basically shifting the Aftershock, Little Bigfoot, and Macho Grandes to the common section, if you will, because while these are strong cards, they are impactful, the real fun of the Mastery Pack Guardian card list, to me, is the Guardian interactions offered by a lot of the other rare cards. So I think those should be front and center for this type of play experience. So in terms of getting that 42 count, it works out perfectly if we do cut out Aftershock, Little Bigfoot, Macho Grande, and stick the other higher stat value cards, right? Like our Stonewall Confidence and our Crash and Bash into the rare slot. Crash and Bash specifically red, of course, because it is a nice premium 4 block. 2 of every equipment except Ison's Peak. So this does include the shields. Now you might be thinking, why not cut Merchant's Hood? Well, Merchant's Hood is fun in the sense that, someone using it to reshuffle their hand to be able to pull off a really powerful turn, and then giving, Velda across the table a whole bunch of Seismic Surge. When it comes to blues, I'm excluding Crush the Weak because it has very little interaction with the actual set, only hitting Little Bigfoot, right? And I'm shifting Stonewall Confidence again to the rare section, so only require 2 of them rather than 4 as the other blues. For the yellows, similarly, getting rid of Crush the Weak, and then red, since Crash and Bash is up there with the rares, along with Stonewall Confidence, I'm using Crush the Weak to fill out that slot and provide a big attack, right? So again, to try and make this a little bit clearer, we're treating Stonewall Confidence and Crash and Bash red as rares because they offer a stat premium when it comes to this type of play experience. Stonewall Confidence allows you to reach block thresholds to basically get around dominate crush effects, which are the big disruption of the match. Whereas Crash and Bash, similarly, it offering a big 4 block does that similarly. So basically, they offer a stat premium and they can slow down the game, meaning I would like them to be a little bit less common and easily accessible. Then for our rares turned commons, Aftershock, Little Bigfoot, and Macho Grande, putting them actually as commons is a little bit nicer because they can speed up the game, right? These are impactful effects that can offer big damage, so why not make them just a little bit more accessible? Plus, unlike all the other rares in the set, they come as their tricolor scheme. But again, in order to create this selection of cards, I have the luxury that I did open a whole bunch of Mastery Pack Guardians. So take this more of a suggestion than necessarily a hard line plan on how to, again, prepare your Smash Palace kit. I think fundamentally the idea is just to have a nice big cohort of cards for you to be able to grab the box out and go nuts with it, right? So I think mainly tackling the commons is a great starting point because, again, you have a lot of power in the event deck to keep the game fun and interesting. You don't necessarily need the big powerhouse cards like, for instance, the Majestics of the set, right? You can then, again, if you have access to the rares, I know they're a little bit harder than most other sets to get a hold of. I can completely understand that, again, finding 2 copies of each rare, a little bit of an arduous ask. But again, in the sense of creating a varied experience, I've tried to also aim for utilizing every single card in the set, hence why it's not beeline to XYZ, because they're the most impactful effects, right? I want there to always be a varied experience whenever I pull out my Smash Palace box. But of course, if randomness isn't your go, you could always go with pre-constructed decks, which also make up the other half of my Smash Palace box. So, making up the other half of my Smash Palace kit, again, we have those cube shells for our randomized experience, but then we have a more streamlined, easy play out of the box experience, right? For instance, my partner, this is probably not her go. This, I can rope her into playing a game or two, right? If she doesn't have to think, about putting something together, if it's just ready, set, go, right? So it is one of the reasons why the Crack Shuffle play experience is really nice, but you don't want to really have to be going and buying new packs every single time just to have that experience, that streamlined experience. So I have built decks for each of the 7 heroes now. The main idea is not to be just outwardly powerful, right? Just to beeline for the XYZ, the big crush effects, certain cards, but to try and make them fun, thoughtful, and a little bit impactful. So, for instance, we'll crack open the Victor, and I will put all of the deck lists in the description, right? And I will probably be refining them and tuning them as I, play test and have the experience. And I go, well, Bravo's nuts, he's broken. I really need to tune him down because there is a little bit of discrepancy between abilities, right? But then that's also the fun of UPF because someone with that hero becomes probably your big target, right? But in terms of Victor, right, he has the ability to get to 3 gold and then dominate and +3 in attack, meaning his most impactful set of cards is probably the Thumps, right? Even though he doesn't benefit from the dominate, the +3 is really, really nice, right? Because most likely this is going to go unfully blocked, right? So it is some level of hard disruption, so that's really nice. But then also in conjunction with that, we have, for instance, the annexation cards, which definitely would be fun crush effects. And again, with a +3, most likely definitely crush and get their effect off. So yeah, I definitely want to again showcase the cards that were well designed for the limited experience, but aren't really at the forefront of Mastery Pack Guardian, unfortunately. So yeah, we'll go over a few sort of decision points for each of the heroes, and then again, I will put all of the deck lists in the description. So if you want to recreate them, they don't use Majestics, right? They just use the rares and commons from the set, and not a huge amount of the rares either. You could probably achieve it a little bit more easily than I understandably get finding 42 cards, right? 42 rares, 84 blues, etc., right? Although the blue shouldn't be too hard. It's 4 per pack, so yeah, no, that's still a decent count of packs, right? That's 21 packs. 2 boxes. Yeah, it's more reasonable than finding specifically 2 copies of each, right? But anyway, on to the heroes. So of our 7 heroes, this is basically how I would class them, right? We have Fight Master Cox. It's basically just an RNG goblin, right? He's relying on stacking the event deck to his favor. He doesn't really have any true synergy with some of the other cards, right? Even, for instance, Volfa with some of the crush effects, if you're hitting 2 people, that can be really fun and really beneficial to you, right? The annexation cards, for instance. So I would say he's probably the weakest, but he also has the potential to be the greatest if you line up the event decks correctly. But middle ground, we have Bolfa Bare Hands and Groundbreaker Cricks, right? So these are, again, pretty fair heroes, right? They're fun, flavorful, but they're not over the top. So Bolfa Bare Hands, pay 3, next attack with Crush, gets to attack an additional hero, definitely really nice. I wish there was a little bit more synergy with some of the cards. So for instance, like Aftershock would be great, because if you could target 2 people with Aftershock, you then double your Seismic Surge, and that would be wonderful. But, oh well, it is capped to crush effects. And then Groundbreaker Cricks is basically going to always be able to generate Seismic Surge, and potentially every now and then get a +1 to turn on. Again, cards like Thump would be really nice, right? Raya the Unyielding is, I think, combo, right? Because basically you throw out all your equipment, you get a whole bunch of gold, and then you have the ability to sift through your deck and line something up, right? It's not super combo-y because, there's not a super amount of big setup and payoff in Mastery Pack Guardian, but I think we could still probably do some fun things with her. And then we have the dominating trio of Bravo, Velda, and Victor. So Bravo being on call, pay 2 to get a +2 on a dominate, scary, right? Velda, at least you have to set up a seismic surge. And as Victor, it's basically a turn timer, right? Where X clashes come out, and then you get to your gold, and then you go, because that's the other thing, there's not a whole bunch of disparity between the other power points as well. So generally speaking, whoever Victor selects should probably have the greatest chance of winning the clash and getting him the gold, right? So they're definitely the three that definitely need the most tuning, or at least the reining in, because they can definitely storm away with the game just because, again, dominate, a plus. It's all very, very significant with these types of cards. So starting off with Flightmaster Cox, right? Stonewall Confidence or anything to really slow it down and protect him, I think is definitely really nice, right? So again, the Stonewall Confidence is offering, the ability to block more with one card and counteracting dominate is definitely significant, right? And then we have Emerging Power. I think the goal would be to set up and then line up the correct event to get the payoff for it, but I think he's probably most up in the air in how to correctly design a nice, easy deck for him. There's definitely some fun stuff you can do if you open up deck building to other sets. He would benefit immensely from obviously wage gold or just gold generation in general, but we work with what we got, right? For both the bare hands, we have, again, setting up some extra buffs like Embolden, and then landing some big crush effects on multiple players. So Cartilage Crush, right, and basically disrupting 2 turns would be really, really nice. So I think for me, the big thing is either he wants a 3 or he wants Seismic Surge and a 4. That way it's basically 2 blues into your big effect, right? And at the very least, you're getting cards from your opponent. If you had some way to get that Dominate off, or again, his ability synergized with something like Thrump, he'd be kind of nuts, right? But still, you get some of those bigger crush effects off, like the old ones or the annexations, and you're in for a good time. Groundbreaker Cricks generates some Seismic Surge by clashing, and then can have that +1 on any of her attacks, meaning Promising Terrain, really nice, synergized with ability, and then again, that +1 on a card like Thump to give it Dominate and the discard, beautiful, easy done, right? Rhea, because of her gold generation, is the hero that I think synergizes most with High Riser, because you have the ability to draw on cue, right, and then be able to swing for 4, so she's definitely a lot slower, but you can get that value through your hammer, and then, the ability to re-equip equipment is definitely going to be a fun, flavorful thing, so Annexation of the Forge has to go in her deck. For Victor, again, you gotta try and steer away, right? It feels like his ability should probably be just crush attacks as well, but oh well, right? Again, a +3 on Thump. It doesn't need his Dominate, it gets its own, is very, very significant. Other than that, just being able to generate Seismic Surge. He doesn't really need the discounts, but again, I want to keep him fair and balanced. I don't just want to give him a whole bunch of payoff, a whole bunch of big stuff so you can clash. In fact, I think the go for a fun experience could even be give him a small deck, right? And the idea is he forces clash through a card like Clash of the Mountains, and then you select your opponent, because you do have to choose your opponent, so, maybe there's some incentive to lose, which is kind of weird, because Victor doesn't seem like the guy to throw a match, right? If anything, he's the type to pay off the opponent to win the match, but yeah, throwing the clash to then get the gold token could be something, line up to 3, and then go to town on someone. As for Bravo, the on-call turn, face up, dominate, 2+2, I mean, the counterplay to this is, there's Disable and Fault Line as the Arsenal disruption, right? So that does have some level of use, but generally speaking, he does seem like the runaway hero. So I think the best thing to do is try and keep what he can dominate a bit lower. So for instance, grind them up would be a 7, meaning that equipment piece of 3, you're done. Otherwise, you're looking for one of those premium block cards, but he still needs some level of fun, right? So I think anytime you can get to at least 9 with dominate, the crush effect is most likely going to land, because you most likely won't have that many pieces of equipment. This is probably where, Rhea could step in. But yeah, there's still some fun stuff you can do. And then for Velda, right, Draw a Crowd has to go in. Draw a Crowd is just the ultimate fun UPF thing. Throw a little bit of chaos into the mix, and also then just stack up the surges for your effect. So Draw a Crowd, make everyone draw. You then get +3 on your next turn, and if you dominate lined up. Other than that, you can definitely give her the heave cards. They're definitely going to be substantial, but without, Tectonic, for instance, getting to 3 could be a little bit of a difficulty. So you're kind of relying on other people slipping up, potentially, right? Not realizing you got 2, drawing a card, maybe rare off a gold, and then getting your dominate off. So yeah, that's sort of the overview I have for each of the heroes. Again, I'll put the deck lists in the description if you do want to recreate them, and I will be updating them as I go, as I figure out, what works, what doesn't work, what's busted. And if you have any suggestions, always happy to hear them. Other than that, let me know what you think, and we'll leave it there. Hope you're enjoying Smash Palace, because I really want this type of product to succeed, because I want it to be continued. I don't want it to be another fun, flavorful thing that gets shelved because, it didn't do too well, right? And I think it goes way beyond just Mastery Pack Guardian. Again, it comes with a lot of good stuff. The event deck alone is fantastic. It's definitely there to be the spice of life for UPF, right? So Pick one up if you haven't. See ya.